Hi everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about a series I enjoy so much, The Legend of Zelda. This video, as you may be able to tell by the title, is about dungeons, a part of each game which provides enjoyment, boss fights, story progression, and brand new environments to explore. The Zelda series has tons of dungeons, with each game having as little as 4, but some having as many as 10. So I wondered, what would I consider the best dungeons in the series? Well, today, I'm going to decide, ranking the top 5 in my opinion based on their atmosphere, boss fights, items, and my personal enjoyment when I played them. I will not dive too much into the music of each dungeon, but I will take the music into consideration a little bit in later rankings. So without further ado, let's get into number 5. So, first up on our list is the Sacred Temple of Time, a dungeon from Twilight Princess. This is the 6th dungeon and about 2/3 into your quest. Its name is very clearly a reference to the Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time. However, it wasn't a dungeon then, but a sacred area where the Master Sword is kept, which was a key to the sacred realm in that game. But back to Twilight Princess. This dungeon is a great one. Personally, I really enjoyed it when I first played, but I would not consider it the best dungeon in Twilight Princess. Those will show up later. The aim is to get a statue to the front of the temple, which you discover used to be there to open a way to the rest of the temple. The environment is incredibly nice to look at. Being a sacred temple of the past, the dungeon is well polished and decorated nicely. The enemies in this dungeon consist of Armos, Beamos, and Dynaphos. Oh, and we can't forget the Dark Nut, an incredible mini-boss, which tests all of Link's skills as a sword fighter. The new item you get, the Dominion Rod, is used to control large statues, and allows you to take the statue to the beginning of the dungeon, where it opens a path to the boss's chamber. The boss, Armagoma, is a nice reference to Queen Goma, once again from Ocarina of Time. You must use the newly acquired Dominion Rod to control one of the 4 massive statues, and punch the arachnid. After defeating the larger spider, its eye becomes a smaller spider and tries to scurry away, but a simple punch with one of the larger statues quickly cleans up. Now collect that shard of the Mirror of Twilight and get moving to number 4. Next up is a temple from Majora's Mask. This one may be surprising, but I would consider this dungeon to be a strong contender for spot number 4 on this list. Now let me explain. Great Bay Temple is the 3rd dungeon in Majora's Mask, so you have a few items at this point, and a nice selection of puzzles in this temple allow you to go crazy with your inventory. But items alone would not be enough for this dungeon to be number 4 on my list. Majora's Mask's transformation masks save this dungeon from being a bore. The Goron and Deku masks are basically useless here, but luckily we still get to use my favourite mask, the Zora mask. Utilising this mask to take tight spiralling turns at high speeds when in the water. Just doing this is incredibly fun, but let us talk more about the environment of the temple. As expected with a temple called Great Bay, there is a lot of water, and the main gimmick is to activate valves in order to change the direction and pressure of this water, so you can access new areas. The new item, while boring on paper, the Ice Arrow, allows ice to be created on water. This creates tons of new options to access new areas and get new collectibles, like stray fairies. The boss fight, named Georg, is a giant fish, and that does sound boring, but you can use the Zora mask to swim into the boss after shooting it with an arrow, and by using the newly received ice arrows you can create temporary platforms to stand on to get a better angle on the boss. Or you can avoid its jump, so you don't take damage. I know this dungeon is not highly regarded, but considering Majora's Mask is my favourite game of all time, it gets some extra points in my book. And the combo of the Zora Mask's versatility, as well as the ice arrows being a very good concept in the series, pushes this dungeon to a strong 4th. Now let's move on to number 3. Returning back to Twilight Princess, we move to the Snow Peak Ruins. Kind of a giveaway, but Ruins sets the scene quite clearly. It is a destroyed, rundown mansion, full of snow and ice in the northwest of Hyrule, right in the mountainous region, and now infested with monsters. Several theories have tried to decipher what the mansion used to be, but from what we can tell from gameplay, it holds several military weapons, armor sets, and cannons, leading people to believe it was a home for Hyrule's military, but now has been forgotten about and the soldiers reside in a new barracks in Castletown. Anyway, back to the dungeon itself, the concept is to locate a key to a bedroom at the top of the house, in order to get a shard for the Mirror of Twilight. But the Yeti giving you instructions is ill and sends you on a wild goose chase as she does not remember where the key is. You pick up ingredients for a soup instead, to try and cure her ailments. Halfway through the dungeon, you gain access to the ball and chain, and oh my, what an item it is. It's an extremely situational item, but it is awesome to wield. A massive iron ball with a steel chain which destroys anything in its path. But for now, the ice scattered around the ruins, which helps you progress. Already, this dungeon is incredible, with its design, objective, and incredible item, but it gets better. Just as you get into the bedroom, the Yeti succumbs to the Twilight aura coming from the Mirror Shard. The Yeti is now encased in ice, and you must use the ball and chain to destroy the ice. Not only is the boss such a simple, yet extremely satisfying enemy to overcome, the music just tops it off, with some yummy icing on this already well decorated cake. When defeated, the Yeti couple that occupy the ruins are brought together, instructing you to take the Mirror Shard away, to avoid making the Yeti sick again. I love this dungeon, and it's a fan favourite, but for now, we're going to move on to number 2. Number 2 on my list is the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time. Stepping into this dungeon is already a treat. The music is incredible for the environment, really making you feel like you're trapped in a vast desert. The first room is decorated with carpet and big statues inscribed with text. The rest of the dungeon is presented as nice as it can for a game on the N64, but still provides that atmosphere that draws you in. The best room, in my opinion, is the central one, with a grand statue in the middle of it. This dungeon utilises the time travel mechanic of Ocarina of Time, and is the only one to do so. You play the first part of the temple as Child Link, getting the silver gauntlets for Adult Link to use when you come back 7 years in the future. The silver gauntlets are a stale item on their own in my opinion, but are crucial to proceed in the temple. They allow the movement of larger, heavier blocks in and outside the dungeon. This dungeon has a second item though, the Mirror Shield. I personally really enjoy this item. It has little to no use outside or inside the dungeon for that matter, but has a very nice design, and is a fresh sight to look at after looking at the Hylian shield the whole time as an adult. Travelling through the temple, you descend into the central room, and shine light on the statue's face to get to the boss room. First, you battle the Iron Knuckle, a giant knight with a massive axe that the Twin Witches has turned the Spirit Temple Sage into. You then battle the Twin Witches themselves, Kotake and Koum, using the Mirror Shield to reflect their fire and ice attacks into the other one. Then they fuse together to form Twin Rover. A mix of both the witches' fire and ice magic is bombarded at Link. You must absorb 3 fire or 3 ice beams to fire back at the boss, then attack it with your sword to defeat them. After the boss is defeated, you receive the Spirit Medallion, the last item keeping you from going to face Ganondorf. Now let's get on to the final dungeon. Finally, my number 1 pick. This goes to the Arbiter's grounds from Twilight Princess. Atmospherically, the dungeon hits the spot perfectly, making you feel like you're in some sort of horror movie as soon as you walk through the doors. Skeletons, spiders, bugs, quicksand, everything that makes a sand temple terrifying. The dungeon feels like an ancient tomb, and tops this off when ghosts appear in front of you later in the dungeon. Using your sense ability, you're able to see the ghosts. They are slender and point at you, while mouthing words we cannot hear, only some faint noises. As you move through the grounds, you come across the temple's item, the spinner. This item is probably the most entertaining in the game, albeit the most useless. Quite simply, you jump on the spinner and you can connect to tracks on walls. This takes Link on a roller coaster ride, travelling on the rail, being able to jump from track to track, and avoiding spiked spinners travelling on the same rail. It's just funny to see Link spinning away and travelling at high speeds across this dungeon. This temple also features an incredible pair of boss and mini-boss. Starting with the mini-boss, Death Sword's room is simple, but full of mist and dimmed lighting. The only thing in the room when you first step in is a sword tied to the floor. As you cut the ties, the sword floats in the air, and you cannot see what you are fighting, but it's ready for a duel. You must enter Sense to see him. Then the fight begins. The battle itself, unfortunately, is a little boring, but the atmosphere is perfect. The dungeon's boss, Stallord, is also incredibly easy when you know what you're doing, but it utilises the spinner very heavily. First, riding round Stallord's chamber and jumping from the outer rims on the spinner to damage the boss's spine. Once defeated, you think you have won, but its head is still alive. Now, you ride round a tower in the middle of the room, travelling upwards, chasing the head and jumping off the tower to hit the head mid-air to send it plummeting to the ground below. Then, you go down to the bottom of the tower to hit Stallord's head with your sword. It's just funny to me to fight this ancient skeleton who is massive and has a floating head with a spinner, and it looks so comedic to see Link just standing there, waiting for his point of attack. After defeating the boss, you can venture outside to discover the Mirror of Twilight. This dungeon gets some extra points for providing a lot of story just after completing the dungeon, as you meet the sages and know the true backstory of the King of Evil. I said I would not comment too much on music, but because this is spot number 1, I think I have to. The dungeon's soundtrack and boss music complements the atmosphere incredibly, with quiet music in the background, however, intense music when it comes to the boss. And there we have it, my pick for the top 5 Legend of Zelda dungeons. I'm sorry it was quite long for a top 5, but I hope I gave my thorough opinion. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.